Hello and welcome to Out of the Blue, a Chelsea podcast recorded just a stone's throw from Stamford Bridge. And as if it couldn't get worse, Chelsea seem to hit rock bottom every single week on this podcast. To break it down, I'm Teddy and I'm joined today by Harry, who is back to defend himself from his Garnacho praise. What do you have to say for yourself, Harry?
Reputation in tatters, but I stand by it.
Yeah, well, that clip just seems to get more and more views every day. For a little bit of actual certified and I'd say respectable football opinions, we've got Peter Rutzler on the sofa with us as well. Welcome, Peter, to Out the Blue.
No, thank you for having me. It's the first time in a while I've been called respectable, so that's good. Maybe that says a lot about what I do outside of my job, but no. Good to be here.
So, for those of you who aren't familiar with Peter, you can catch him on the Game podcast by Times and Sunday Times. But you cover quite a lot of stuff with London football, don't you, Peter?
Yeah, so I'm a London football reporter for the Times. Chelsea take up most of my bandwidth, so you'll probably notice if you read my stuff that's a lot of Chelsea. But yeah, I cover clubs in London and the South as well.
Well, it seems like there's no better place to start than with something that you were definitely covering yesterday. Me and Harry had our heads in our hands following that game. Chelsea versus Nottingham Forest. 3-1 to Forest at the Bridge. What happened yesterday? Because I'm just in utter disbelief. I switched on the game with renewed optimism after that FA Cup semi-final. We'll start with you, Peter, because you were there.
I'm smiling. I'm smiling at the idea that you approached that game with optimism. You had, if you take away the lead semi-final, right, you're coming in off the back of Brighton. So if you're just looking at league results, it shouldn't be a surprise. And I think considering what we've seen of this Chelsea team, going back through Rossini, going before Rossini under Maresca, this is a team that tends to perform when the lights are on, when people are watching the big games, the big stage. Semi-final FA Cup at Wembley, we're probably going to get a performance out of them. There's still a chance of winning it. Come back to the league, come back to the monotony, the loss of just slipping away from Champions League football. Back to a 3:00 kickoff on a bank holiday. Not that makes much difference, but do you know what I mean? It's a totally different environment, and you get the same outcome that we saw again in the Brighton game. Particularly the first 15 minutes. I don't think it was as severe. I mean, the Brighton game, you come away, obviously Rossini comes out and talks about them being unprofessional and questioning their attitude. I didn't quite feel it was fully Downing Tools level, but in terms of their application, attitude, that kind of thing, you contrast it with this Nottingham Forest team who have, yes, they're fighting against relegation. And yes, they've got this huge game in midweek. But this second string team, featuring players like Taiwo Awoniyi, who isn't going to play on Thursday, has made one Premier League start this season, and yet was so much more up for it than pretty much most of the Chelsea home team. So it's what we've come to expect, I think, from this group of players. And I felt, actually being in the ground, I thought Stamford Bridge was too kind to them. That was my reaction, particularly by half-time. And yes, there was Jesse Derry's injury, which I'm sure we'll come on to. And there were boos. But just having seen Brighton and then seen this against this beat, there was a United home game, right, where you have the makeshift defence. You've got Mazraoui at centre-half and Aidan Heaven at centre-half, and can't score. And that felt, that's not great. But then you look at Forest. Luca Netz was making his first Premier League start at left-back. Zach Abbott is a centre-back playing at right-back. I'm not sure how many starts he's made. Morato's been up and down with form. And Joao Cunha apparently dislocated his shoulder recently. So,
and they still ball Chelsea off the pitch.
Right, you're right. So
but I think it's less about like the opposition and less about the makeup of the opposition and players and, whether people are positionally correct. It's way more, I think, Chelsea's downfall currently about what's going on internally. Like, it's about the way that the players are unable to gel with each other. It's about the complete lack of optimism or application, as we said, in the league, full stop. And we always talk about the magic of the cup and we can pull something out of the bag. And that was demonstrated against Leeds at Wembley. But it was a total fluke.
But fundamentally, there are good players in that group. Like, there are some fantastic players in that group.
Yeah.
But you're right. I think it's culture. It's the togetherness in the group. There are players who seemingly are losing confidence, I think Cole Palmer is very much seems to be in that bracket. Obviously, we're not used to seeing him miss penalties. We're seeing him try things, and he's trying to make things work. But I think since the injury, we've still not seen him. I don't think he's dominated a game. I know he scored a hat-trick at Wolves, but it wasn't wow, I'll never forget this kind of hat-trick. We haven't really seen him dominate a game since the Club World Cup final. But I don't think he's alone. I think you say Caicedo's form's dropped off. And then there are others, and you look at, okay, well, are you giving everything? I thought Cucurella had a really poor game by his standards, particularly the first 15 minutes.
Well, the thing with Cucurella, and we're saying there about player standards and the attitude, I thought it was really interesting that he is one of the senior players, purely just by his age, let alone the amount of minutes he's played. But as one of the players who has been outspoken about the club and about the issues that lie with the recruitment strategy, I just couldn't get over the way the second that goal goes in the first 2 minutes, he doesn't block the cross. He immediately turned to his centre halves and put his hands up in the air as if to say, "What are you doing, guys? That's all on you." And it does feel a little bit like, I know we really maligned the way that Enzo Fernandez has a go at all of his teammates, but it feels like the lack of responsibility across the board is just, it was, you said there about Jesse Derry, and it was really refreshing, it felt, to see somebody who didn't look weighed down almost by the trying to look around and go, okay, is everyone pointing at me and saying I'm in the wrong? Because he was a breath of fresh air. I don't know about you, what you guys thought of him. I was excited every time he had the ball.
I thought he was the best, but I don't know what you think, Harry, but I thought he was the best player on the pitch, but he just felt very earnest. He just felt different. And I think you described it perfectly, just not weighed down by it. I mean, even with Marc Cucurella, he's voiced his disillusionment. And if that's fans are disillusioned about what's going on at the moment at Chelsea, there's going to be the same within the dressing room. There'll be players thinking, where are we going? What is the direction at the moment? And I mean, that was the top line of my match report was that game. Is like, this is a team that has no direction. There's no authority at the moment on the pitch. You can make the case in terms of the players we're seeing.
Yeah, you
in the dugout.
You can't throw Tosin on the pitch and expect him to be the one that's going to call people out or point the finger. And
especially I think he gets subbed off at half time as well.
Well, exactly. And I think like this squad does need someone that points the finger. I think we've called Enzo out in the past after his comments and said that if you're putting in masterclass after masterclass, you can behave like that potentially. And the same goes for Cucurella, but it's been disaster class after disaster class, and that maybe doesn't earn you the right to really boss people around, or that leadership needs to be earned over time, and that respect needs to be earned by putting performances on the pitch. And like you say, having Derry on the pitch is exactly what you want from a debut, like breath of fresh air, playing to enjoy himself, and you can't see that in the rest of the team whatsoever. It's not good watching.
I think the thing that I found really, as a fan, I'm now finding I'm really overanalyzing everything. And particularly with Derry, I think it seems unlikely that we'll see him again just by the nature of the concussion sub and the protocol that comes with that. But I was watching him and thinking, okay, we often criticise Pedro Neto for the fact that he never seems to take that touch towards goal or make that, maybe always takes the pass back. And every time Derry had the ball, it seemed that first touch was towards goal, trying to take on his man. But I was sat there looking at the players on the pitch thinking, even if he has a 10 out of 10 performance, if Neto and Garnacho are fit next weekend, I don't doubt for a second they'll be back in the team. And the reason I kind of looked at that with all of our defensive frailties was the fact that Joro Hato is sat on the bench, didn't come on at half-time in place of Levi Colwill, who it was great to see get minutes. But this is Hato, who was Chelsea Player of the Month for April. And it does seem that it doesn't really matter how you play because we're playing this possession-style football. Even Lavia sort of displacing Andre Santos, who has been so consistent throughout the season, maybe not headline-grabbing, but I think in terms of identity, we've talked about the lack of it, but week to week, I find that it doesn't matter how players play. We know we're going to see Delap for at least 30 minutes, because I thought he was completely headless again yesterday. Started out in the middle, then seemed to move out left. I think my issue at the moment is that we don't know what to expect ever from this Chelsea team.
Which is bizarre, because we know exactly what to expect from all the opposition that we're coming up against. Like, pretty much, maybe we was taken by surprise against Forest on the weekend, on Monday, but generally speaking, like everyone that we played over the last 6 league games, which we've failed to score in other than against Forest, we know what team we're coming up against. Like, we know exactly what their strengths and weaknesses are. and we know exactly how we should be playing. And actually, I think, ever the optimist as a Chelsea fan, think that we're totally capable of nullifying and competing. But for some reason, which I think we'll talk about today, like we're just not matching up.
The squad dynamics are interesting. I mean, I agree on Joao Hato. I think it was him, João Pedro, and maybe Andre Santos, you can make a case as well, were sort of the better players under Liam Rosenior, or at least you could, certainly with João Pedro and Hato, you could see that there was progress. He's almost been a victim of kind of dynamics a little bit, because by putting Callum McFarlane in as the interim head coach, there's no authority there. He's not going to call people out for performances. He's in it's an awkward position. It's, in my opinion, it's not a good look for Chelsea to have a coach like that in place for this length of time. I think it made sense in January. I think now it reflects basically the embarrassing way this season has fallen apart. But it does mean that you kind of have to play the team that is going to you can expect the most from, or at least aren't going to not perform in a certain way, if you know what I mean.
Like the lowest risk options, is that
right.
what you mean?
That's what I mean. I mean, it was great to see Jesse Derry, and I think he made an impact. But I think you are right. You're not going to get a coach like Callum come in and just go, right, okay, Garnacho and Pedro Neto, internationals, this young kid's going to play, because it's all about managing this, basically trying to nurse this ship over the line, which is already sinking, but you need to get it to port, and that's kind of what he's doing.
Especially after Rossini's just lost the dressing room because he didn't have any clout, right? The next guy needs to either have way more clout or play it safer than Rossini did.
Yeah.
Well, it seems to me, just on that sort of authority, it's crazy to me that this time last week, we're seeing pictures of Cucurella, Enzo Fernandez and João Pedro not training because the squad have days off, all in Madrid watching the tennis, which for me it felt very reminiscent of however many match days ago, the week leading up to our 1-1 draw with Burnley, where the players were given time off. And I know that McFarlane in that pre-match press conference before the FA Cup semi-final went, no, I do know what the problems are, I'm just not going to talk about them. You said there, Peter, about the fact that it's potentially not a good look for Chelsea, the fact that he's in that interim job without his pro licence, without any real first team experience. Do we feel like in any way there is any rationale behind him being there? I know there's been a lot of things on social media in the last week or so about his links to kinetic coaching and the club's wider links to that, but it just seems very peculiar to me to be able to identify, okay, there's something seriously wrong with the coaching team, so we'll get rid of the manager, but we'll keep everyone else. We'll keep Hudson, we'll keep Hogan, we'll keep McFarlane. Is that not just the same team, just with a different mouthpiece in the dressing room? Yeah,
I mean, that was part of the criticism, at least that I had, of him coming in. I mean, this is Chelsea, right? Previous caretakers, Hiddink, Di Matteo, Benitez. I know it's a longer period, but do you know what I mean? Like, there's a degree of gravitas. You're going into a dressing room, you need to command authority. The idea behind it was to try and galvanise the team a little bit, change the mood a bit, because clearly once Liam Rosenior came out after Brighton, basically throws the players under the bus and says, look, I mean, we've asked him, it's like, you're saying they're not playing for you, and that's what we kind of saw. Just a change would be better than what would come next, and I don't necessarily disagree with that. And I think you could easily make the case of, okay, well, it's worked in the cup. You've got a cup final, and it's Man City, so let's not get carried away. But there's the case for that. I think one thing with taking McFarlane, one, he's obviously done the job before, so it's not completely out of the realms of possibility. It's a more cost-effective way of doing things, considering you've two managers have gone in a season. And we know that not qualifying for the Champions League is going to be very painful on the finances for Chelsea and what they're able to do in the summer, and moving forward, really, in terms of the direction the club want to go in.
That's kind of quite worrying in itself, though, that after losing a manager, the priority is like risk management and like damage limitation versus, okay, let's try and do as well as we can out of this from a playing perspective. Like,
Well, that's what it looks.
because it feels like they've got rid of Rossini and gone, okay, well, Champions League is a write-off anyhow.
Well, this is the thing.
So let's try not to spend any money.
Yeah, well, this is the thing. When McFarlane came in, you know, I think the first question was, well, what's been going on? And as you said, he had to clarify it, because he said, that's not for me to say. Well, actually, it was for him to say, because he was on the coaching staff at that time. So he was coaching the players, so that he was implementing Liam Rosenior's ideas. So it's not a clean break. It's not completely fresh. I feel a bit bad for Kinetic, because I know they've been caught up in this whole thing, because Kinetic do fantastic work in South London with kids, and they've had a terrific record of getting players who've sort of fallen out of Cat 1, Cat 2 academies and getting them into clubs, and they've got a great success rate. But there's a clearly a connection there. I mean, working with Joe Shields, who's the sporting director, and Dan Hogan, who's come in, and Harry Hudson. I think Hudson's the 18s, isn't he? Hogan's been on the coaching staff as well. I think in terms of building his stuff, it makes sense for him to work with the people he trusts and knows. So I don't think there's more to it.
With that though, Peter, just out of interest, because as Chelsea fans who I'll be fully admit that I get caught up in the Twitter storm, and there have been a lot of these Twitter sleuths who've uncovered some of these links, but you can't really argue with the sacking's the wrong word, but the moving on of someone like a Harris Suleiman at Chelsea, who was the under-18s coach, was unbeaten at that point. And I know that the first thing that BlueCo defenders have pointed to is the fact that both the under-21s and under-18s won their leagues, but the launch pad was already there. Harris Suleiman had 18 years of experience at Chelsea and a pro license, only to be moved to the bomb squad. I think it shapes into the narrative that we are discussing more and more each week, that structurally, from a fan's point of view, I look at that and I just think, what is the point in the identity of Chelsea? I completely agree, trusting people and having people that you know are going to implement a certain ideology is important, but is the identity of the club itself not important as well? Yeah,
I think Suleiman's loan manager now, right?
Yeah.
So I think what makes why the spotlight's hot is the context, right? We're looking at everything else appearing dysfunctional. So then we look at everything else and work out, well, this is also symptomatic of the due diligence. What due diligence was done with this, blah, blah, blah. And I think that's a legitimate accusation about, what processes are going on there for that to happen. In football in general, it's not that different when you bring coaches that you know to work with because you think they're good coaches, so you employ them. That's how it works across the board. Given the context, the general sense of disillusionment, the lack of understanding of what the direction is, and the anger towards the sporting directors as well, it's quite a potent mix. So I think that's a key part of it, definitely.
But is that also, because that's not necessarily the way that it works at other clubs like Premier League over, right? Because I remember hearing that when Enzo Maresca came in, he really didn't like the fact that he was being given this backroom staff and had a problem with Bernardo Cueva being in the room because he wasn't one of his people that he brought over. And if we're going to continue hiring managers that are going to expect to be able to bring their own people, and actually this seemingly kind of cronyism setup is kind of, here's your backroom staff, we're issuing it to you, we've already vetted them, deal with it. It's just going to perpetuate the next issue and the next issue and the next issue, and managers surely are going to continue to fail, is the way that it feels for me.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's the challenges that Chelsea are facing on multiple different fronts in terms of who they're bringing in, the staff that they do, the structure that they have. I mean, Maresca had brought in quite a few of his own staff. I think he had 4 or 5, if I remember rightly. And yeah, the idea when the project is failing, when it's not working, then you will look at these things and go, well, have these processes been done properly? And outcomes would suggest that they haven't been.
Well, I'd like to cotton in on something there. We've talked about you mentioned the project. And you have experience, Peter, of not just this Chelsea and this ownership, but previous years of different football clubs within London and elsewhere. And I cottoned in yesterday as a fan onto the fact that De Zerbi, Spurs manager, was in the director's box, only a week and a half away from a big derby, a game against Spurs that could potentially relegate them. And I thought it spoke volumes of the project as a whole and the lack of self-awareness of the optics, how fans view things. Have you, in your experience as a journalist, ever experienced not even just ownership like this, but a season like this, from how things are run off the pitch?
Like this? No, No, I mean, I've been covering Chelsea for about 18 months. So I joined the Times in November 2024. So that was basically thrown into it mid Maresca. It's extraordinary the amount of off-field stuff. Just all the little things. De Zerbi was there, because obviously Tottenham are playing Chelsea in a couple of weeks. So in the same way that Thomas Tuchel's there to watch the England players. I think he was seen speaking to Paul Winstanley and Sam Jewell. I think obviously they crossed over at Brighton. But in terms of like general, take a step back, all the different things that happen even like last week, I just had a day off on Wednesday, and then suddenly you're writing about Mykhailo Mudryk. His appeal is not just been given a 4-year ban, which wasn't confirmed by the FA. It was CAS that have come out and said, yes, he's got a 4-year ban and he's appealing it to us. There's always something. And I think keeps me busy, which isn't a bad thing as a journalist sometimes. But no, I mean this season's been pretty. I was going to say unique, but I guess in a Chelsea context, not that unique, is it really?
Not with this ownership anyway. It seems to be pretty similar stories year on year. Yeah, the De Zerbi thing in the director's box is, I think, as a fan, absolutely crazy and unacceptable. Like if an opposition manager or any manager, like you say, Thomas Tuchel, wants to come to a game, they can come to a game. You see them in the crowd all the time.
He wasn't actually in the director's box.
Oh, was he not?
He was not with the.
Okay.
He was in a box next to it, but he wasn't. I don't think he was in their one. No.
See, this is the benefit of.
I'd like to see him in Matthew Harding lower. Put De Zerbi in Matthew Harding lower, and see how long he lasts.
I think it's what you mean. What you say there about the context is the big important with all of this. That I think if we'd won the last few games and we were comfortably in the top 5, no one bats an eyelid at that. And it does just seem that BlueCo lack that sense of context. And particularly, I feel it is particularly poignant to mention the fact that there are now 2 more protests that have been announced, both before the FA Cup final and during the Spurs game. We chatted a little bit last week on the podcast how we were worried as Chelsea fans potentially that the way that BlueCo reacted and the directors by sacking Rosigne might be seen as, in their eyes, okay, we're listening to the fans, we're doing something. And I'm finding more and more, as you say, Peter, you're busy all the time with more and more news stories. I'm finding I'm learning more and more about finance, just trying to understand how private equity firms work and all the debt and what have you. But it does seem like in the last few weeks there have been more rumblings of discontent within the Clear Lake consortium. I saw a Bloomberg article about people whose money is in that being worried about Bowley and Egbali spending disproportionate amount of times on sports projects. What could these protests actually amount to? I've seen Twitter speculation about, wouldn't it be great if Aries could take charge and put the club into administration because of the £500 million loan? But I've not seen any big actual news companies telling that kind of story at the moment. What can we actually hope for as Chelsea fans with our protesting?
Well, there's always a value to protesting because you're voicing how you feel, and it's not just confined to what you see on social media, which is always very emotional, it's very reactive. Are you going to get BlueCo to sell up? No, probably not in the short term, but I think there's an understanding of that. It's more about trying to make your point clear that you're not happy with the direction that the club is going in, whether that be in terms of the way they're building their squad, whether that be in terms of matters around Stamford Bridge and the future of Stamford Bridge, whether that's around the sporting directors. All of these things matter, you know. I think the idea that a protest doesn't matter because you can't achieve what you can't force someone out of a club isn't really fair. I think they do have a really important place, and because they will shape opinion, because it doesn't go unnoticed. Fans turn up, fans pay the money.
I think it's really important. I think it's really, really important for people to make their voices heard. Like, the message at the moment, I think, is quite confused. Like you say, there's like 3 or 4 kind of topics that are generally being bandied around, and some of them around individual players, some of them around sporting directors, the stadium situation. And I think that needs to be really concise for anything to be really effective. But let's not forget, Manchester United have been protesting their ownership for 20 years and not much has changed, really. It's kind of the first time it's been quiet over there the last 6 months or so. So, I don't think that Chelsea fans should be under any illusion that anything's going to make a massive difference overnight. But I think the real thing that's going to change things at Chelsea Football Club is their own self-analysis. And I get the sense that BlueCo up to this point have been able to, whether it's the sporting directors or whoever, are able to do this annual review and point to something that says that what we're doing is working, whether it be the Club World Cup or, getting to a final or getting rid of unsettling managers and therefore steadying the ship. This season, I think, or certainly I feel, if we don't win the FA Cup, will be the first time that they shouldn't really be anything for them to point to say, actually, we're moving in the right direction.
I think even if they win the FA Cup, I think the fact that we're in this situation is as I said, I think it's quite embarrassing.
Yeah, I totally agree, but I'm just...
I know the point you're saying.
Paul Winstanley and Lawrence Stewart will definitely say, oh, well, we won a trophy, and it's a domestic trophy, and we're in Europe, therefore, big tick, let's all give ourselves pay rises, and we'll crack on next season. We'll buy another load of 18-year-olds and see how we get on. But not winning that, I think, will mean that, like you say, there's masses of pressure from the investment fund. There's masses of pressure on the sporting directors. There will need to be shake-up, and we need to just continue pressure from a fan perspective.
Well, the next big decision these directors are going to have to make, and we are seeing more and more speculation about it every day, is who is going to take the reins. And it's funny there you mentioning Manchester United, and particularly on the topic of McFarlane and interim coaches. I think a big part of maybe Chelsea fans being so angry is being able to see a club like Manchester United that has been in utter shambles for however many years now, the effect of bringing a club legend to the fore who has actually played to the strengths of the squad he has got at his disposal. I cannot fathom the fact that we continually try and play this style of football, playing out from the back when centre half and the back four in general just seems to be one of our least confident positions, particularly Bob Sanchez, who I saw Cabe Salioko saying the other day that, when he doesn't have to play it short, he's the best keeper in the league. And yeah, he is a great shot stopper, but we saw it again yesterday that when the pressure is on, those long balls go straight out into touch. Who is the manager to put forward? Because there's been names bandied around, like Xavi was today in the news. Peter, you've already discredited that for us already today.
He's one that I think he's one that they may have looked at, but he's not one. He won't be the next Chelsea.
So then other names are Iraola, Marco Silva, and who else are we looking at, do we think?
So I think when it comes to Chelsea selecting a new manager, there's two things that I think they really care about. Well, maybe three. Results, I think, is something that is everyone cares about that. I think the ownership genuinely are worried about results. They want to appreciate assets, so players will need to increase in value under managers, and then eventually, I think they'll need to win something, right, and play this style of play. I think Marco Silva has never really appreciated an asset or won anything, so I don't see why he should be a legitimate candidate. Yes, he's out of contract in the summer and available, but I don't think that qualifies him to be Chelsea's next head coach.
You look like you've got something on the tip of your tongue there.
No, I mean, I covered Fulham before, so whether Marco Silva will be the next Chelsea head coach, I don't know. I think there are reservations you can have about him, but if you take Iraola, for example, as a contrast, I mean, Iraola, I think, won something in Cyprus. Silva's won a cup in Portugal, won the league in Greece. I think in terms of improving players, he's very good at that. That's probably the one thing he's very, very good at.
So is he going to increase
probably
the value
what they may look
at
with him? Yeah, absolutely. I mean, in terms of what they've done at Fulham, it's all built on players that you would probably have put on the scrap heap, though, actually.
And he knows tossing out a bio, so there's a link there.
But I think when you look at the other names that are in the mix, Fabregas, everyone says, I'd love to have Fabregas. Yes, he's done a good job at Como, but he is, his fingerprints are all over Como. There's no way that he's leaving that club. It's kind of made in his image, and he just wouldn't get that kind of control, freedom, support, or anything at Chelsea. And I think personally, Xabi Alonso has the clout. He's increased the value of players tenfold. You look at Florian Wirtz, and he's actually won something against the odds with Leverkusen, and getting sacked by Madrid because you're going to try to introduce too many tactics probably isn't a bad thing.
But do you not think he's going to encounter some of the same issues at Chelsea? I know there are whisperings online that the dressing room rallied against him. But there are those personalities in the Chelsea dressing room. We've already talked about Enzo Fernandez and Cucurella speaking out.
I think they would have respect for Xabi Alonso. And by the way, this is me saying Xabi Alonso is my favourite candidate, not that I think that he will get hired by BlueCo. In my opinion, actually, I'm being cynical here, but I think BlueCo will be scared of someone like Xabi Alonso because he has experience and will potentially call out their way of doing things and will be a voice that maybe fans and players side with in favour of siding with BlueCo, which would be massively embarrassing for them. So I'm at a loss a little bit. Iriola feels like probably the most likely, but I don't know if I agree with that as an appointment.
Do you think, Peter, that this whole conversation is potentially rendered null and void, though, depending on how the season ends? And I say this purely if I were in the shoes of an Andoni Iriola, looking at the moment at the fact that he potentially could get his Bournemouth side Champions League football, playing this high-pressing, intense style of football, and he has afforded himself the luxury of being able to be picky. Looking at Glasner, he's kind of got the same thing, having achieved the FA Cup win with Palace and fallen out with the Palace ownership. What is the appeal of Chelsea if we finish 13th, if we lose the cup final, and with all the off-the-pitch dramas? Are any of these managers going to want to touch the Chelsea job with a 10-foot barge pole?
Well, that's it. That's the big point, right? I think what Chelsea need is someone with authority, and the question is, will someone with authority want to take this job? And that's going to be a very difficult thing. It's still Chelsea. There'll still be somebody who thinks, I can fix this, I can get this right, I can work with their structure, I can deliver on the players that they have in that group. I think Xabi Alonso is interesting because he's a player with a lot of reputation, a coach who's built a fantastic reputation with his work at Leverkusen, will feel a bit hurt from Real Madrid. But managers don't want to be out of work for a long period of time. That's the other factor. And the jobs that you think were there are not necessarily there at the moment. Because it looks like at the moment, things can change. Say Newcastle will keep potentially Eddie Howe. Michael Carrick is moving very much to the forefront of what Manchester United want to be doing.
Do you think Slot stays?
Arne Slot, it seems, it's from the reporting, I don't cover Liverpool, so I can't say for certain, but it looks like he's in a more secure place than I think we all sort of thought. So suddenly you look at that picture and you go, okay, I might have to sit out again. And we've got post-World Cup where once national teams finish, there'll be coaches who will either leave, consider their place, they'll enter the market. And suddenly it's quite a contested market in the first place. So you can't rule that out. So of course, and it's still Chelsea. It still has the resources, it has the ambition to do what it wants to do, to be in the Champions League, to win trophies. So that will appeal. If you can do your job effectively, they'll look at the past track record, and that will have to be a point of discussion. And you do think that if you're going into those conversations with the sporting leadership, and if the sporting leadership doesn't have any changes, it was interesting when they dismissed Lim Rosenior. I think there was a great, obviously, clear relationship with Rosenior because that dated back to Strasbourg. But you could see even the mention of the word self-reflection, which has been talked about, is very much a different tone to what's gone before. There has to be a recognition, and there needs to be, because he was the internal hire, and it's backfired in their face. Like, the only people to blame. There is no one else. Like we were talking about before, there's no one else. Like, this is on them.
And we knew that when they made the appointment as well. Like, everyone, we kind of talked about it on the pod. They're making a rod for their own back.
Yeah, it had to work.
And if it doesn't work,
and it didn't. So naturally, there should be some form of accountability there. And we don't hear them, we don't see it. And this feeds this sense of disillusion because no one knows the direction, really. There's this idea of what the model might be. There's a sense of, they're going to slightly tweak the recruitment model. I never really had the sense that age was always a cut-off with Chelsea. It's more about appreciating value. It's if the right players there, they'll buy it. Like João Pedro was at 24, 25, and he comes in, Pedro Neto was 25. Like, they're not super young, some of them. But they've not bought enough of the right players. They've not created the right culture in the dressing room. This is my opinion on it.
Well, I think you're spot on there with the player that comes to mind for me with that is Garnacho, that we seem to be linked to every transfer window leading up to when we eventually signed him. And regardless of his form on the pitch, those links were never quieted in any way. They always seem to rear their head. And I think it is that thing of looking at him as he's an asset with 100+ Premier League appearances.
Also, it's the briefing that I have a problem with. Enzo Maresca is obsessed with the player. And it's like, Enzo Maresca has no say. So why is it being reported that the manager wants this guy? Because he came into the club and barely ever played.
Before we get too far away from the manager conversation and onto players and what have you, Peter, I would just like to cotton in there. You were saying about the manager merry-go-round and how there are jobs that will maybe not come up that we had expected to, and there will be more managers in the mix. Do you think we really could be waiting as long as post-World Cup? Because I hadn't quite appreciated how short that turnaround is going to be from the last game. I know that some managers at the World Cup might be finished a lot earlier than others, but particularly looking at a club like Chelsea, which might be selling bigger assets if there's no Europe whatsoever, might be trying to restructure the defence, the midfield, significant parts of the team. Surely at that point, I know Nagelsmann is a name that Chelsea fans always seem obsessed with. Could we really wait that long?
I don't think so. I don't think that's realistic, really, if you're Chelsea, for some of the reasons you outlined there. I mean, there's still an insistence that they're not going to be selling someone unless it's for football reasons. Whether that actually plays out, I'm not sure. Because the impact of not having Champions League revenue is big, and it's more to the point, what do the players feel like? Are they going to buy in? And that's the thing, they want to see the new coaches. They want to know who that is and what the future will look like. Who are they going to be playing for? I think the wider context makes it interesting if you're a coach on that ride, looking at opportunities. But I think from a Chelsea perspective, in terms of the planning and everything else, I'd be very surprised if it's not done before. Well, you'd hope before the World Cup, but during the World Cup.
Have they set themselves a deadline in terms
Not
of...
that I'm aware of, but I mean, this is part of it. I mean, there's this talk of this period of self-reflection. We don't know what that looks like. So
for the next 10 years.
Well, with all this drama off the pitch, wouldn't be surprised if you forgot we still had a load of games left, including a trip to Anfield next weekend. And looking at that and at the league table, it makes for pretty grim viewing. 5th place is now impossible to reach, and for Chelsea to climb into 6th, which may not even garner Champions League football, we're relying on Brighton, Brentford and Bournemouth all to drop points. Bournemouth 4 points. It seems completely unlikely, and I think the thing that typified the situation for me is the fact you've got Virgil van Dijk coming out going, this is an unacceptable season for Liverpool, we can't repeat it. And they're going to guarantee Champions League football. Surely we're going into this with Callum McFarlane probably giving the players more days off, just running for the hills. I dread the idea of even switching this game on to watch it this weekend. How are you feeling, Harry?
Well, I think if this season has taught us anything, it's that you probably actually can rely on one of those 3 teams, if not 2 of them, dropping points before the end of the season. This part of this area in the table has been chop and change and movement from start to finish. So, I mean, I've got both my fingers crossed right now. But I think there will be some movement still. I don't back us to beat Liverpool. I don't back us to secure Champions League football or even get top 6. Well, yeah, to get to 6th. To be perfectly honest, we're in free fall at the moment and there's no signs of that changing. I genuinely believe that the FA Cup final is our only chance of salvaging any kind of pride from this season.
Well, of course, it is the last game we play before that final as well. And as if it wasn't complicated enough who to pick, we've had players out with Knox, Garnacho and Neto, Levi Colwill, who we were told we should have patience with, only to see him thrust into the 2-0 down, soon 3-0. Reece James still to have no minutes. How are Chelsea looking going into this weekend, Peter?
I mean, you just summed it up pretty well there. I mean, in terms of fitness, I mean, there's been a few issues. I think Colwill's substitution was basically on the basis of having someone who is a leader, who can talk, does carry some authority, and that was kind of the only card that McFarlane had to play, really. And it's good that he got 45 minutes under his belt. I think Chelsea are a better team when he plays. There was a reason that Enzo Maresca was so sort of upset when he was injured, because of what he meant in terms of his profile, the way that he starts build up from the back. I think we saw a bit of that actually in the second half. So I think it'd be quite risky to throw him in from the start, and you'd hope it wouldn't be rushed back. But in terms of, I mean, we could talk about different players or availability. It's just whether they will turn up. And it's Anfield though, so I mean that does qualify as a big game, and Chelsea tend to kind of turn up for big games. So let's see. I mean, there are multiple reasons why you could say that there's a motivation issue, or that we're not seeing the same application. Whether that is disillusionment with what they're seeing, confidence, just not having it, whatever. Not a coach that's third coach of the season who's the under-21s coach who only stepped up to the senior environment in January. So there'll be lots of factors to that. I think that won't be less of an issue for the FA Cup. And I think maybe if you're a player, you're looking at that because there's something tangible to win. I think they're probably, if you get the sense watching them that they may have just internalized the fact that we're not going to get European football. I mean, it was Champions League football before the Forest game. I think that's done. But even European football, and it doesn't carry the same weight, does it? Pursuing Europa League, Conference League when it should do, and they need it to.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of these players have incentivized deals, right? So failing to qualify for the Champions League, failing to get to certain thresholds will hurt them to a degree financially. So,
but I guess they're all so inexperienced and so young that, like, as soon as that Champions League threshold is out of reach, we always think of these players like on match day, why can't you get up for the game? But it must be every minute in the training ground they're moping around, like the whole club must be just totally deflated, right?
Yeah, there will be. That's the general mood. Like you can't escape it. These guys are all on social media. They'll see stuff. They'll hear stuff. That'll be internalized to a degree.
Garnacho's not hearing me sing his praises.
Well, I hope he is, because he probably needs it. But it comes back to the point we were talking about earlier. Like when you have a lack of authority, which is in the dugout, which is on the pitch, these are the kind of moments that those characters come to the fore, can pull the group together. Good football teams don't always have people that get on. They don't. There are people that there are always sort of stories that come out about players who didn't actually get on with their teammates. But they will still fight together, and will have a way of forming a strong, cohesive team. At the moment, Chelsea don't look like that. It doesn't look. And what's more concerning is you don't know how it comes back together. And I think, considering what's happened this season, considering the results, confidence is going to be incredibly low. Recovering from that is going to be difficult. And if they concede early, which is what happened against Forest, and it was basically like what's happening again, then it'll be problematic. But it's Anfield, so.
Well, you said there about this kind of situation bringing leaders to the fore, and I think the only silver lining for a lot of Chelsea fans will have been João Pedro's goal. And I kind of looked at it beyond that, and for somebody who seems to be, in terms of speaking up in the team, he's not that guy. We've not seen him be that guy. I did find it quite refreshing to see the only player who did turn up, in fact, because his link-up was good. He seemed to be running. There was one point where he even ran back to defend all the way. But it was nice to see him come out in his post-match press conference and actually say, we can't blame the manager now. And it's interesting there you say about togetherness, Peter, because that was what McFarlane cited as the reason for letting João Pedro, Cucurella and Enzo go to Madrid, saying, it's nice they want to do that together. And I wonder if hopefully someone like João Pedro, who's got links to Barcelona that have been in the press the last week, whether any of those come to fruition, you'd like to think maybe some of those more quiet figures in the dressing room, those are the sort of people that we might actually rally behind as a team, as a fan base. Again, this is more of this optimism which you ridiculed at the start of the pod.
I'll keep quiet this time. Harry, you go on, you take it.
Well, before I get too carried away, I am conscious of time, and we do have some questions that we have been sent in, which I'd like you guys to have a stab at answering. First up, we have from Max. Is this season worse than BlueCo's first, 22-23, where the club finished 12th in the league?
Do you want to go first?
Yes, I do think it's worse.
Yeah.
To be honest, I think that season was full of turmoil and was tricky, and there was new ownership, and it was kind of shrouded in this doubt around the Ukraine war and Abramovich moving on and all that kind of stuff. Like it was a very weird time, and it was hard to kind of judge anything with any kind of consistency. But since then, we've seen the other clubs that were in similar situations pull away and fix up, and we've failed to do the same. So there's definitely a much more palpable sense of impending doom around Chelsea, I think, this time round.
Yeah, no, it's also 4 years into the project.
Yeah,
4 years into the project, and this is a far worse position.
It seems like being back at square one again.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Exactly. We're at a point where it's an inflection point again. It's considering the direction of travel. I think it's all the more frustrating because if you wind back to the last summer and winning the Club World Cup, you looked at it and go, okay, I can actually see it's taken a while. It's been very messy. It's been very expensive, but can actually see what the sort of trajectory was. To go from that position to now is a major step back. It's a major step back in every single way. I mean, in terms of the players that they bought last summer, in terms of what's happened with the coach they then replaced him with. I think that it's certainly a worse position, mainly because of they could have had a case to say we've made steps forward, and that's just been blown up.
So next up, we've talked a bit about players who may or may not feature on the pitch for the rest of the season for Chelsea. One who we definitely will not be seeing is Estevao after his hamstring injury. And some reports coming out today about the fact he has gone back to Brazil for his rehabilitation, being overseen by Chelsea. These are just reports, but should we be worried about him rushing back to Brazil to try and play in this World Cup?
Well, I think if Chelsea are overseeing it, supposedly, then I don't think it can be a bad thing, really. I mean, this guy is, 18 years old? Like, just being in Cobham doing physio is not going to be good for your mental health when all of your mates and your teammates are playing in, near to home. So it makes sense for him to be around family, to be back at his old club or whatever, and hopefully getting the same standard of medical attention that he would get here. I don't really see it being a massive issue. It's obviously quite odd.
I suppose the big issue is considering the severity, from what I understand, of the hamstring injury. Like, the expectation is going to be, I'd imagine it's very difficult for him to play at the World Cup, but it's the World Cup. And you always get this around the tournament because it comes every 4 years. If you're a player, there's 3 or 4 in your career, if you're lucky and you're good enough. They'll be fit, and obviously to play for Brazil. And Ancelotti really likes him.
He would start, right?
Yeah. Oh, well, certainly.
He's got 5 goals in 11 games for them as well.
So I think he would want to do everything he could to try and play. And from a Chelsea perspective, it's going to be difficult because it's, maybe you can't. Do you know what I mean? Obviously, I don't know the exact nature, other than I think it's quite a severe hamstring injury. So it's that classic club v country thing, and I think that's something that Chelsea are now going to have to manage. And for us, like, it's so hard for you to say to a player and be like, do you know what? It's actually better for you just to miss out this World Cup because you're going to be better for it longer term. It's the World Cup, so it's very difficult. I mean, obviously, the logical thing would be to go, look, if it's severe enough that you're just not going to make it back for the tournament, rest. There will be another one in 4 years. You're an unbelievable player. You'll be okay.
And they're playing matches in Mexico, so it's not far. There's going to be masses of Brazilian support at this World Cup.
Yeah,
right? Like,
yeah,
it will be well attended. So probably not many games in the USA that many. I'm sure fans will be able to get to because they're being priced out.
This could easily have been his sort of breakout tournament, couldn't it? Really, So it's incredibly cruel, and you can understand why he was so upset when it happened. And I think this process now is going to be tricky because what you don't want is people telling him you can do it. There will be a way to do it if you can't. So this is going to be the balance that they'll have to strike. But we'll just have to see.
I think it's interesting looking at Palmer as well, someone who clearly has had an ongoing niggle throughout the season, and there had been within the fan base worries that maybe he should have had a surgery. And apart from anything else, the fact that it is 2.5 weeks turnaround or something like that before pre-season starts. I think one of the only things that has been quite reassuring is the fact we don't have that many international players in the squad come the start of pre-season. But one player who definitely won't be featuring in the summer, maybe even next season, who you mentioned about there, Peter, we've heard from David about Mykhailo Mudryk. And I'm going to adapt his question slightly because we mentioned how the FA hadn't even released the information of his ban and how he has the same representation as Paul Pogba did for his appeal process. Is it a similar sort of case? Can we expect as Chelsea fans, or should we be hopeful that it might be reduced to 18 months? Because as a fan who quite likes Mykhailo Mudryk and looks at the team we currently have and thinks, actually, you might have worked or been at least a good option, the lack of any information whatsoever, I can imagine as a journalist, is probably quite difficult.
Yeah, it's been very frustrating. I mean, there's strict confidentiality over it, which is why I think it's unusual for us to be in a situation where the FA didn't actually confirm the ban, and we hear about the appeal first, which then reveals the ban, because what are you appealing? Yeah, I mean, it's hard to say. It is very hard to say. I'd suppose from Mudryk's perspective, he'll hope that his appeal can help the ban be reduced. But without the actual details, other than the fact that, as we've reported at the Times, that he was found to have taken meldonium, it's too difficult. It's very difficult to say at this point. So, yeah, I mean, it's been a really interesting process, because obviously there's been a lot of nothing, a lot of silence, and then suddenly he popped up in Wrocław for the Conference League final, and we were like, "Whoa, where's he?"
Wearing his kit.
Yeah, exactly.
In a bar.
So, and then obviously he's been training in Uxbridge, hasn't he? I think some kind of resolution either way would be good for everyone.
Yeah, I mean, the sense I get is that my understanding is that whatever ban gets confirmed after the Court of Arbitration for Sport review this case, is that it will include time served. So if he's 18 months in now, which I think he is,
more or less, he's coming up to that. Yeah.
So he could be ready to play next season if it gets reviewed in time. But these appeals were confirmed in February or something, or that's when the appeal went in. Yeah. So, I mean, these things take forever. If you ever try to buy a house, you know how slow lawyers can be. But there's appeals and letters being exchanged. But yeah, I would love to see him back in a Chelsea shirt. I think he's pacey. I wasn't necessarily convinced by him as a Chelsea player when he got the ban, but I do think that he could bring something to our team that we don't currently have. But I also have read that there's also some clauses in his contract around not being able to play football, and potentially there's some clawback for Chelsea there. And if we were to, void his contract, then there'd be a bit of a write-off on his transfer fee. So knowing how BlueCo are, that might not look so unattractive as well.
To finish up then, we mentioned him already with whether he's been fully fit this season, but Cole Palmer, I feel like the goalposts have shifted quite significantly. And I go back to Chelsea versus Leeds at home in the league, where it was 2-2, having surrendered a 2-0 lead, and Cole Palmer misses a sitter right at the end of the game to win it. And walking out of the ground that night, yes, fans were angry and upset, but not at Cole Palmer. And it was the sort of consensus that Cole Palmer fully fit last season, he buries that. The number of goals he has scored or has set up, he's got credit in the bank. Has Cole Palmer's credit run out?
There you go.
I wouldn't say that his credit is run out. I think he still deserves a bit more time, to be honest. I think Chelsea fans, myself included, need to be really careful calling out players and calling time on players' careers, because he has had an injury. He's been dealing with this niggle. He's been slow to come back. His energy levels clearly aren't where they were, and it was only 2 months ago that he said, "Okay, I actually feel good now. I actually feel that I can do all the things that I did before." And that also coincides with when we had a massive downturn in form, masses of chaos around the managerial status of the club. Every other player around him is not performing to the same level. And the number 9 that's playing in front of him now is very different to the number 9 that he was playing behind for the past 2 years. João Pedro doesn't create the same amount of space behind him that Nicholas Jackson used to. He doesn't stretch defences in the same way. So I appreciate that Palmer has had less space to play with. He's a marked man, and he's coming back from injury. And I think people need to be aware of that, and there's nuance to this situation that needs to be appreciated. I do also think that Cole Palmer could go to the World Cup, come on the 85th minute in 3 games and do a madness, and every England fan will be behind him, Chelsea fans included, and he'll come back next season with renewed credit in the bank. So I do think that we all just need to take a minute, work out what the hell's going on at the club, get things settled, and then start judging players when there's a consistent basis to judge them on, rather than pointing the finger and blaming everyone as soon as things aren't going the way that they did when things were a bit more stable.
Yeah, I agree. I think there is if you step back, Cole Palmer at his best is one of the best players in the world. We'll start from that benchmark, right? And then you take everything else that's happened this season. We're not even talking about the chaos that's been going on with Chelsea, just him individually and the injuries that he's had. I mean, he's spoken about how he's just found it difficult. It's the first serious injury of his career. It seems to be quite a particular one around his groin, and he's sort of come back from that. He had a slight hamstring issue the other week. that process has not been easy for him to adjust to. And then you throw him into this environment with Chelsea at the moment. And is it a surprise that he's underperforming by the levels we can reach? Not really at all. Is it a concern? Yeah, because as I said earlier, I don't think we've seen him at his absolute peak best since last summer. And I think that's got to be a concern, and that should be really in the thought process of what Chelsea are trying to do now in terms of their next coach, because he's a unique player. He can win you a tournament. He, as you said, he could come on the 85th minute. He could win you a World Cup. He's that good. He can do that.
Do you think he should go to the World Cup?
It's a really difficult one. I think the case for him to go is based on what he's done in the past, and it's based on what he might do, what he could do if he's at his best. But the evidence suggests he's not at his best. He's not fully fit, and he's had a difficult year, and there are others in better form. So it's very tricky. But if I'm Thomas Tuchel, I would want to find a way to take him, because I know that if push comes to shove, I know this guy can turn up under immense pressure and deliver for me, which he's done for Chelsea and he's done for England. He scored in the European Championship final.
And I think these competitions and Tuchel as a manager is much more about players and moments rather than systems and managerial kind of approaches in general. It's much less macro than that, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's hard, because how would you say to Morgan Gibbs-White in current form, like, this guy's actually, I'm taking him even though his form is nowhere near yours? It's difficult. But you're right, I think it's moments. And I don't know. I don't know. I mean, I'm all, my go-to is you take him. If he's fit, you take him, because he might win you it. But it's tricky.
Well, I think
particularly when you look at him now and you think his confidence isn't at his best, and that's a worry.
The thing we've got to remember as well is there are still several weeks of the season left. We could have some of these moments at Anfield this weekend, at Wembley against City the following weekend, not to mention the chance to relegate Tottenham, where we've seen before...
Save Tottenham.
Or save Tottenham.
Sorry.
Yes. Or save Tottenham. I'm choosing to think about my rose-tinted glasses and the Battle of the Bridge, and even a terrible Chelsea team that year rallying to do something against the worst club in the league. Well, gentlemen, thank you so much for joining me today. Thank you, Harry, for coming on to defend yourself despite some terrible takes. And thank you, Peter, for coming on and enlightening us with some more accurate knowledge.
Wow, sort of.
It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you for listening to Out of the Blue.